Good morning, members. We have already formed a quorum. It is also time to start the meeting as scheduled. So I declare the meeting open, and I would like to invite the team from the administration to join us. And I would like to declare interest. I own properties. I'm an accountant. Now, Mr. Tommy Zhang is with us, and the accountancy firm that I work for have given advice on taxation for clients, including stamp duty. I don't take part in such work myself. Mr. Andrew Leung, I would like to declare what I have already declared. Mr. She, yes, I declare what I have already declared. Mr. Ronnie Tong, I repeat my declarations. Mr. Alan Leung, I repeat my declarations. Jeffrey Lam, I repeat my declarations. Kenneth Leung, I repeat the declarations I made. Mrs. Regina Yip, I repeat my declarations. Miss Emily Lau, me too. Well, if I may seek your suggestions. Yes, Tommy? I repeat the declarations I made. I have received requests from 2 members who have submitted CSAs. Today, they have a busy schedule, so they hope that perhaps we should talk about members' CSAs first, and then we get a response from the administration. I think other than Mr. James To, all other members who submitted proposed CSAs are all present. Mr. James To has already phoned us to say that he will be absent today. So if we come to his CSA, Ms. Emily Lau can do it on his behalf. So Emily, if we are to talk about members' CSAs and then we get a reply from the administration, is there any objection? Because basically all the members who are moving members' CSAs are here. If there is no objection, then why don't we deal with it first? Okay, draft CSAs. Altogether, we have received CSAs from 6 members. So first of all, I'd like to give the floor to members who are moving CSAs, and then I will give the floor to the administration. After members have spoken on the CSAs, and then I'll open the floor to members for questions. For members' draft CSAs, they have already been circulated to members. And then for the administration's response, again, it has been circulated to members. I'm sure you have already received all the papers and you have also read the response. I suggest that we start from Mr. Abraham Sheck. So paper CB bracket 162/13 to 40 bracket 01. 1826/12 to 13 bracket 01, and then bracket 62/13 to 14 bracket 01 is the admin's response. Mr. Chair, I don't want to waste members' time. After so many months, I think members must have noted that the drafting of the bill is a mess. I'm now moving an amendment. Before I showed the amendment to the administration, 3 senior officials told us that they could not accept it because they couldn't water down the effectiveness of their demand-side measurements. And I've been told that my proposed amendment will have a lot of loopholes. However, many months have already passed, and we can all see that the bill as drafted is a total mess. I think the bill itself has got many loopholes. I've spotted the loopholes, and therefore I would like to share with you my proposed CSA. Not that I want to weaken the effectiveness of the draconian measure, but I really want to take away the toxic gas. Madam Chair, I think members must have received my paper, CB bracket 11826/12 to 1301. It's very clear. My intention is as follows. For Hong Kong citizens, for those who are Hong Kong permanent residents. Well, in fact, in the Basic Law, there is no distinction between Hong Kong PR or non-Hong Kong PR. According to Article 25 of the Basic Law, everybody is equal. Here I'm saying that for Hong Kong permanent residents to own a company, and should there be no change in ownership in 3 years' time, no change in shareholding, and no changes in transactions, then perhaps they should be allowed to do the following by way of a declaration: to be refunded the SDS paid. It is as simple as that. So the administration has said that it is not confident that there won't be any change in terms of the shareholders. Well, I think it is a matter of reimbursement. The administration is not even willing to examine my amendment, and the administration is not doing it on its own. The administration simply says that it is not acceptable. I don't think I'm addressing the issue from the real estate's point of view. Rather, I'm looking at the interests of the property owners. Of course, you would say that I represent the property sector. But if you simply reject my proposal on this ground, then you are not sort of you are not telling the truth from the other statements. I think it is laughable. We are talking about universal suffrage. For universal suffrage, we are interested in the facts. We are interested in the reasons. We don't want to know whether it is justifiable. If it is justifiable, you shouldn't care. You shouldn't mind who's the proponent. If it is worried that because the CSA is moved by property sector representative, and so you won't support it, then please support the government instead if you go along such a route. And it's difficult to get members who are so pro-government, and it will be eye-opening as well. Madam Chair. Now, parents of type 2 children won't be able to get it, and they have to make a declaration. So please read my amendment, and then you'll understand that it will affect the economy of Hong Kong, and we also look at it from the property sector's point of view. For Article 105 of Basic Law, you are entitled to transactions. Now, for the special stamp duty, it is said that you want to prevent speculation. Now, there won't be speculation for 3 years. If you don't like it, make it 5 years. But it seems that the consensus is 3 years. That's why I've made it 3 years. Madam Chair, moreover, as to the law case in the CFA, well, it seems that we have got 3 classes of people in Hong Kong. What a pity. How come that in the population we've got 3 classes? First of all, Hong Kong PR who obeys the CE. Second, Hong Kong PRs who have their own thinking. They would like to read the Basic Law, and then they find that they are entitled to freedom of transactions under Article 105. But then they are not permitted to do so because a single male has decided against it. For the 3rd class, we are referring to those who haven't lived in Hong Kong for 7 years. So that's the crux of the matter. Now, it appears that the law is being interpreted and implemented by one single male. Mr. Chair, would you like to focus on your proposed CSA? Yes, I've already said my piece. So one single male is opposing this man's proposed CSA. Administration. Well, we are just looking at the issue on its own. Please take a look at paper CB bracket 162/13 to 14 bracket 01. We take the matter seriously, and we have come back on the reasons as to why we find Mr. Sheik's CSA not acceptable. For Hong Kong PR companies, I think Mr. Sheik differs from us in terms of the factor. Time and again, we have already said that by having changes of shares, there will be a change in the control of the company as well as the control of the properties owned by the company. It is commonly seen in Hong Kong, and we have an array of different means to do it and not easily traced. And that's why for Hong Kong PR companies, the idea will have a lot of loopholes. I don't want to repeat the arguments put forward by the administration. Yes, just a minute. Please let Ms. Wong answer the question first. She hasn't listened to me, so the arguments are fake. Mr. Sheik. Yes, please give her the floor to give a reply. I didn't impose a time limit on your briefing concerning your CSA, so I think we should let the Deputy Secretary to speak. Let her speak first so that members can listen to both parties. So, Ms. Wong. Well, it was about the Hong Kong PR companies. We think that there are obvious loopholes. I don't want to repeat the arguments so as not to waste our time. As to Mr. Sheik's CSA, I would like to make a few comments. Mr. Sheik talked about the 3-year horizon. That is, the stamp duty will be paid first, and then if there hasn't been any transaction, then it will be a case of reimbursement in 3 years' time. We understand that for Mr. Sheik to impose a 3-year rule, he would like to make it conditional. But then if you say that the company hasn't undergone any changes of shareholding, it may not actually be the case. It may not be traceable. It might have changed without our knowing it. However, by having a 3-year horizon, it means that you're sending out a message that it will be lifted in 3 years' time. And this will stimulate the demand. So people will think that maybe the prices are right. He would buy a property, and then he will hold the property. And then in 3 years' time, when the ban is lifted, then it can be sold to a non-Hong Kong PR. We think that this is a very serious matter, and we believe that it would only weaken the original effectiveness of the scheme. Now, Mr. Sheik has tried to impose other conditions. Say, for example, there shouldn't be more than 5 shareholders. There shouldn't be more than 3 directors. Again, this will bring about another issue. Why 3? Why 5? Why not 6 or 7 or any other numbers? The rationale isn't clear, so it will give people the impression that we are treating the companies differently, and this may beg the question as to whether we are discriminating against certain companies. But then as far as the business environment is concerned, we want to be fair. I'm afraid that this will beg the question that we are not being fair to all the companies.
And although a statutory declaration is mentioned, however, at previous meetings, we said that, well, when a person makes a statutory declaration or a company makes a statutory declaration, well, it depends on the chance of being found. Now, if they can evade the tax of 15% of BSD, and behind the scene they come into secret agreements, and they can do something that cannot be discovered. So how heavy the penalty is does not matter. We have looked into the details of Mr. Sheik's proposed amendment, and we have come up with these views, and we cannot support his amendment. It's not because of him, it's because of the nature of the amendment. Now, you do not agree, Mr. Sheik? For everything she said, is not justified. She said that she cannot accept a declaration by a company. Now, if you look at my CSA, it's actually very clear. I say that the directors of the company cannot be changed. The shareholders cannot be changed. and it's because there is no change. Well, actually, this has to happen within 3 years. Well, for the refund, actually, they have to pay for it first, and they need to prove that they have paid already. If they do not do that, they will be jailed. Now, if a government does not trust the declaration made by its citizens, then this government is really impotent. It is impossible. Now, the government always asks people to trust it. Well, when we talk about trust, it should be mutual. And when the government proposes Hong Kong land for Hong Kong people, that less costly units be sold to Hong Kong people, then they believe in the declaration of this group of people. They do not have to check. Well, they talk about fairness. Well, I just want to be fair when I propose these CSA, and I feel bad that Hong Kong people are now divided into Hong Kong PR and Hong Kong R. Well, the children whose parents are not Hong Kong residents, they can use the name of another Hong Kong PR and to buy property. So this bill is so messy. Well, Madam Chair, this should be very clear. This is your original option. I have just made some further moves, and I have adopted the views of you. And now I have several more questions. Yes, Mr. Shek, you are very clear. Madam Chair, she said that my CSAs are not justified. Well, how come that is said? Now, this is different from the company's ordinance. Now, for the companies, well, she asked how come it's 5, it's 3, it's not 7 or 9. Well, the government's not doing things that are justified. If I ask the government to explain to me about every ordinance, I think they would also lack justification. Now, I am a member of the pro-establishment camp. Madam Chair, I share the same views as you do. I try to look at things from the perspective of the government, but actually it's indeed very difficult to convince the government. Well, I don't think we can convince each other. Madam Chair, can I make another suggestion? Abraham Shek is representing the property sector. Other members do not want to support me because they do not want to offend their voters. But I am speaking for the 1.2 million property owners in Hong Kong. Well, for some political parties, they also use companies to hold properties. Now, for the Democratic Party, they also do this, and they rent the property to the parties. They have to be very careful, so they should support me. Well, we have this bill here. Now, everything will be caught by this bill. Mr. Shek, yes, you have expressed your views in great details. Next, Mr. Andrew Leung, and please let us know about your CSA. Well, 5 minutes first. Yes, I can do that within 5 minutes. Actually, I am suggesting to add a sunset clause. The Deputy Secretary said that this is just a short-term measure. Well, I don't think the government would regard this as a short-term measure. This bill will be very powerful. So I hope that if the government wants to continue with this, the government can come back and ask for our approval. So to include this sunset clause, I just want the government to do a review at a reasonable time, because we want to balance the government's power. Otherwise, I think we cannot rescind these stamp duties within 10 years. Well, the government started to do something right yesterday because they started to sell more lands, but it's still not fair because the highest bidder would get a piece of land. Now, unless the property market really crashes, otherwise, whenever the government sells a piece of land, the price will go up. And the construction cost is increasing year by year. You're giving people an expectation that they can buy property at a lower price, but that will not be realized. The financial secretary said that property price will drop by 30%, but it's not true for new properties. There are big developers behind them. They have holding power. And the 1.2 million property owners will be suffering because their property price will drop by 30%. So this is a very important piece of legislation. I think the government should regularly come back to us to ask for extension. Deputy Secretary, there are several points. In the past, we have mentioned this. We do not know when this measure is no longer necessary. So that's why we propose the method of negative vetting. Just now, Mr. Leung said that if there is a need, then we can come back with another bill. But I want to say this. If we do demand management, timing is very important. If we do this through an official bill, then we may not be able to react promptly to the economic situation at that time. Our suggestion now is like this. Now, the Secretary earlier on, he promised that with the enforcement of this bill, or after the enforcement of this bill, every year we will come back to members to report on the situation. And secondly, for the negative vetting, the final power of approval lies with legislative members. So it's not that legislators do not have the right to approve it, but timing is very important. So that's why we propose the method of negative vetting. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to say this. If we set a time limit in the sunset clause, then we are sending out a wrong message. The market may think that after 3 years' time, there will not be such a need. So is this a correct message to send out? I think the government does not think so. And there is another technical issue. For Mr. Leung's amendments about SSD, is that it would expire by the midnight of the 26th of December 2015. And the SSD will expire by then. But what we are talking about now is talking about an SSD which started to come into operation on 27th of October 2012. So if you draft it like this, then it would exceed the scope of our existing bill. Mr. Leung, do you want to respond? Well, whenever the government has done something, it would not go back. So there will be no sunset clause and there will be no time limit. So this bill, after it has become an ordinance, it will last for 50 years. So every year they will come back to report to us. Well, it doesn't matter. They would still do the same thing. I think the power of negative vetting is too big. So I hope that the government will change its mind. Well, after 1 year, the government can come up with new data to show us. The government has huge power, but it has to balance its power. or 3 years. If you say 3 years is not appropriate, well, you can say 5 years or 6 years, but now you don't have anything. If you have enough votes this time, and if the bill is passed, you will get what you want. But you have not done your job properly. You are not managing supply, you are just managing demand. But if you are suppressing demand, then there will be a bad consequence. So for children whose parents are not Hong Kong residents, they can buy a lot of properties, and you cannot do anything. And you cannot do anything. If we have a sunset clause, then actually I am helping the government. So you must strike a balance. Thank you, Mr. Leung. The next member that moves a CSA is Mr. Leung Kai-chang. The paper number is 291. Thank you. Madam Chair, I put forward the concept of domicile. Now, if a person is to apply for an exemption, other than being a Hong Kong PR, well, his domicile should also be Hong Kong, but I do not invent this concept of domicile. Now, in the common law, this concept had existed for a very long time. In many countries' taxation laws, they also have this concept of a domicile. And for the government's reply is in paper 337. There are 7 paragraphs, and in paragraph 3, the government's policy intent is that the home ownership needs of Hong Kong permanent residents should be accorded priority.
My amendment is in line with the policy intent of the government. In paragraph 4,
certain HKPRs to the BSD, which is contrary to our intention that all Hong Kong PRs acting on their own behalf in acquiring residential properties should be entitled to the same BSD exemption.
as I have said, some members have said that for children not born in Hong Kong, they may have trustees to make use of this loophole to get exemptions that they are not entitled to or they shouldn't get. Now, I want to say that there shouldn't be any discrimination. We are not discriminating people on the birthplace. Some Hong Kong-born children may be affected. And then there may be residents who have left Hong Kong for 20, 30 years. They haven't returned to Hong Kong once, but then they have also not taken Hong Kong as their home. They have been in Canada for 30 years. Now they see that there is a loophole. They want to come back to Hong Kong to speculate. Now, we have to take care of such people as well. If they don't take Hong Kong as home, why should they be given exemption? As my amendment seeks to do, well, in fact, the legal point is very clear. Now, you say that, yes, there may very well be the concept of domicile, but then the domicile ordinance was drafted by the administration. So it is a clearly worded piece of legislation. Paragraph 5.
For BSD policy, we have grave concern over the actual implementations of the CSA. I think this is totally crap. I emphasize that because
I've been dealing with the ROD for 20 years. I do understand the attitude and the workload of the RRD staff. Let me share some experience with you. In the UK, under the taxation regime, for inheritance tax and capital gains tax, since the 1980s, there are exemptions unless you have domicile. All that you need to do is to fill out a questionnaire for the tax. As a taxpayer, you need to fill out a questionnaire. So I hope you will be lenient in dealing with such cases. My concept is that there may be specific cases in which you have got the reserve power to exercise your power instead of relying on administrative power. So please don't misunderstand the intent of my draft CSA. This is very important. Of course, I know that some members may say that maybe we shouldn't allow people under the age of 18 to own property. This is totally wrong. Under the law of equity and under common law, for hundreds of years, people under the age of 18 may own property indirectly because of the concept of trust. My amendment means that people seeking exemption can do it on a justifiable ground and with something to fall back on. That's all. It's wrong. We understand Mr. Leung's point. Well, for the domicile ordinance, it only spells out the general concepts. And then you talk about the domicile concept. For a person's domicile to be determined, first of all, he has to prove that he's physically present there and he intends to remain and live in that place permanently. Therefore, when we have to take a decision on this, it means that many decisions other than that one have to be made. Now, if we want to introduce an exemption for BSD, now, whether exempted or not, we want the line to be drawn clearly. We want to avoid controversies or disputes. In a moment, the ROD colleagues can supplement whether you meet the requirements of domicile. Usually you have to go to court to determine whether somebody really take a particular place as his home permanently. Now, every day we have got so many property transactions. Do we really want to subject all of them to such a ruling if they are very controversial, very contentious? Members earlier on were concerned about the case of type 2 children as to whether they would be sort of made use of. I want to say that for type 2 children, they are actually born in Hong Kong. They have Hong Kong permanent resident ID cards. They aren't children not born in Hong Kong as referred to by Mr. Leung. Well, originally, the concept is clear and simple in our ordinance as to whether how you can establish the permanent residency of a person. In most cases, we check to see if that person owns a Hong Kong permanent residence ID card. Now, relatively speaking, it's easier to make a rule. Quite different from the domicile concept. Yes, in theory, it is right. But then when it comes to the day-in, day-out operation, there will be a lot of arguments. However, for us, we hope that the guidelines will be clear to understand so that there won't be too many contention. Otherwise, we have to deal with them every day. That's not desirable. Can I say one word? She said that you need to show your ID card, but in fact, this is wrong. The second link says that if a person applies for a Hong Kong permanent residence ID card, the government may grant it to him. So unless you're going to delete the second link, now you have to make it clear as to whether anybody holding a Hong Kong PR ID card can do so. Well, I already said that most cases. The fourth to explain about his CSA, Mr. Tommy Cheung. You'll find his proposed CSAs in paper CB bracket 1 474/13 to 14 bracket 01. Government's response paper CB bracket 1 594/13 to 14 bracket 01. Madam Chair, my amendment is very simple. It is divided into three parts. First of all, a company owned by Hong Kong PRs. Such a company should be exempted from the BSD. As to my second part, since the administration has got consequential amendments, so wherever it appears as Hong Kong PR, I would say Hong Kong PR company as well. And then for the sunset clause, we would like to make it expire at midnight on the 31st of December 2014. I've given the ground as to why I want to have it expired on that date. Now, the more complicated part of my amendment is as follows. Now, the administration has given us a lot of rubbish, and Mr. Shek has raised his hand. After listening to the nonsense and trash of the administration, I would like to clear that so that they won't sort of close their eyes and close their ears and say that the Hong Kong PR company concept has a lot of loopholes and it won't work. The Liberal Party isn't really a party that knows a lot, but then we have come up with this amendment. We have shown it to you. In the admin's response, in paragraph 2, there are a number of subparagraphs, and they are clear about what I intend to do. So it seems that at least on this occasion, they are not totally sort of ignorant of my intention. I would like to await the admin's response before I exchange my views with them. But then it is meaningless to sing to a wall and then to sometimes if you talk to the wall, at least there may be an echo. I don't want to waste too much time. I mean your time. Don't want to waste too much of your time to argue with them. I agree with what other colleagues have already said a moment ago. Now, the DP hasn't spoken yet, and I'm not quite sure whether the Civic Party is going to move amendments. Now, it appears that our expectation of the administration won't be high, and there isn't much that we can do. In fact, today I would like to lobby our colleagues. They may not like my face, my look, but still, I hope that members can read our proposed amendments carefully. It's a very simple one. Let me just add one more word to lobby members. If you try to find a reason to reject my proposed CSA, well, in fact, I have made it very restrictive in terms of the Hong Kong PR company. It is so restrictive that I have reason to believe that if somebody would like to evade the BSD by way of the Hong Kong PR company, it's easier to work it through a Hong Kong PR than a Hong Kong PR company, because the restrictions concerning shareholders, directors, and you need to have a statutory declaration. It will be so troublesome. Now, for the introduction of the BSD, I think the Hong Kong administration would like to enable Hong Kong PRs to acquire properties. They shouldn't be penalized. Now, in my eyes, I don't think the administration's ground is justifiable. The government is saying that it is difficult to implement. Well, in fact, many things are difficult to implement. But on the other hand, all the time, the administration is saying that it is capable of doing anything. Now, Madam Chair, I think you know more than I do. Many Hong Kong PRs acquire properties via companies. Tommy Cheung doesn't own any properties, but my family members have been buying properties through a company. It is not news to us. Now, Hong Kong PRs can buy properties. How come that Hong Kong PR companies with 100% Hong Kong PR directors, 100% Hong Kong PR shareholders are not allowed to get properties? So please read my CSA carefully, and I hope that all members will support my CSA. In fact, what I'm doing will help the administration by improving the bill so that Hong Kong PRs can buy properties, including doing it via their own companies. Thank you, Ms. Wong. We did examine the CSA proposed by Tommy Cheung carefully. Let me answer the last point first. For the BSD, why are we exempting Hong Kong PRs buying properties on their own? Well, we know that despite the fluctuations in the property market, there will be residents who would like to acquire a property, and therefore we would like to give exemption to Hong Kong PRs so that they are not subject to BSD. Yes, we do understand that Hong Kong PRs have been buying properties via companies. I think it accounted for 10%. There must be other reasons to do so. Say, for example, it's more convenient or they need to do so. So we are not saying that they won't be allowed to do so. We have already said that in terms of the loopholes in the transfer of company shares, we believe that giving exemption to Hong Kong PL companies will water down the effectiveness of the BSD regime. So going back to our policy intent, we want to take care of the home ownership aspirations of the Hong Kong PRs. Therefore, our exemption cannot be expanded by too much. And then Tommy Cheung has another point in his amendment. All PR companies will be immediately exempted from the BSD. Of course, he's imposing certain conditions, say, for example, statutory declaration, giving an undertaking that the ownership will not be transferred to persons who are not Hong Kong PR. However, please look at my response. The exemption will be immediate. In other words, the IRD has to check continuously as to whether the undertaking is being abided by. It is only when there is a breach can the IRD impose a penalty. As we have said, transfer of company ownership or shares sometimes are not easy to detect. One day when we discover that there was non-compliance, probably the company itself would have already been wrapped up, or the relevant shareholders have already left Hong Kong. So the tax evasion risk is still on the high side, and that's why we are saying that it is impossible for us to support the CSA. Mr. Cheung also mentioned that there should be a sunset clause. For the sunset clause, he would like to make it expire on the 31st of December 2014. As I have said, it is impossible for us to tell whether we no longer need the measures in 1 year's time or 3 years' time. By giving a date in the bill, it will send out an erroneous message telling the market that we don't need it in a year's time, and that would upset the expectations, and the market may behave differently, and therefore it is not something that we can accept. On the other hand, if we rely on negative vetting, if we don't need it, we can at any time change it to 0 as far as the duty rate is concerned. This is tantamount to scrapping it. And for negative vetting, we still have to come back to the electrical. The electrical can still play the role of gatekeeping. So I think that's more appropriate in dealing with the circumstances and handling the market changes without weakening the effectiveness of the scheme.
You talked about being broader. Can you explain about that more? For BSD, well, in the initial stage, we already said that there would be an exemption for individuals. Now the market is fluctuating all the time, but Hong Kong people would have to buy properties when they need it. But for companies, there are a lot of ways of doing it, and many of these ways will go undiscovered. Shares of the companies can be transferred to other people without people noticing. So at the level of companies, there will be no exemption. Hong Kong people do buy properties using company names, but most of the Hong Kong people do not do this. They buy properties in their own names. So for our proposal, it has already taken care of the need of Hong Kong people buying properties. Well, I hope that I can make use of your 5 minutes so that the Deputy Secretary can give us a more detailed explanation. How come a company can sell a share so easily without the government knowing? Actually, Madam Chair, you know this much more clearly than I do. How would the government not know? For a company, many things have to be registered. Now, if you look at my suggestion, declarations would have to be made. This is something criminal if they do it secretly without telling the government. It's not just about a fine. Actually, this is about perjury. So I hope that our accounting sector representatives and Madam Chair, you are also a very professional accountant. Well, please explain more to me because I am not too familiar with this kind of things. Now, the government talks about perpetual. Now, so this ordinance will be here perpetually. If not, why do you want to monitor perpetually? Deputy Secretary, I think I also said this just now. Well, for Mr. Cheung's amendment, it would give the companies an immediate exemption. That has to be based on several things. For example, their promise. And for perpetual, because now an exemption is given immediately, and for the Inland Revenue Department, it has to check. However, shareholding situation can be changed every day. So does the IRD not have to monitor this every day? So that's what I mean by perpetual. But I don't mean that this ordinance will be there perpetually. You don't want the IRA to check a company every day to see whether its shares have been sold to some non-Hong Kong PR, right? Are you joking? And you talked about perpetual in your paper. You said that this will be perpetual. I don't know how other members view this. Well, maybe you should let us know your views during the CSA scrutiny. Well, will these new stamp duties be perpetual? As for the sunset clause, Deputy Secretary, well, you may gain a small amount today, but you will lose in the long run. Because in the future, when you come back for negative vetting, our members will be extremely cautious. So even if you want to introduce other bills into LegCo, you will face a difficult time. For this particular bill, we really have our justifications. And the Secretary has already promised members this. At least we will come back to report to members once every year, so members would know what we have been doing. And if there is a need, we will adjust it immediately. And we can even adjust the duty rate to 0. We want flexibility because we are not just looking at Hong Kong's economic situation. We have to look at the external economy as well. Now, if we have to introduce a bill each time, then we cannot react promptly. This is what we want to do. Well, the LegCo will always be the gatekeeper, and the authority of LegCo will not be undermined. I have these pro-democratic camp members. They have always said this. Well, maybe now I'm also a pro-democrat. Now you are saying that you will always come back to a report. So what? You have already done it, and even the scrutiny period is limited. Now, for example, the ban on baby milk formula, and there was this filibustering, and suddenly it was implemented. We didn't even pass it. Our eyes clearer and clearer. If the government continues to operate like this, even though you have a lot of votes nowadays, you will lose this vote sooner or later. Next mover of CSA is Mr. James Toh, but is not here today, and Ms. Emily Lau is taking up her place. Madam Chair, well, the government is doing this. Now, you heard Mr. Lam Tai Fai and Mr. James Tan on the radio, and you would think that Hong Kong is in a total mess. And Mr. Lau Siu Kai has asked you to make more friends instead of enemies. Now, being a politician, you need to talk to people. I like to hear what Mr. Abraham Shack said. He said that you want universal suffrage. Well, please focus on this bill. Well, this is related, Madam Chair. This is a difficult job for you. Now, when the government put together this bill, it didn't talk to members. It didn't incorporate members' views. It didn't explain clearly to members. And how many months have gone and how many meetings have we held? Now we still have so many opinions, and some of those people who raise objections are actually pro-establishment camp members. Well, we are all in this for scrutinizing this bill. Well, government officials, how have you ever talked to us before this? James Toh has talked to you a number of times. That is about exempting charitable institution or charitable trust. Now, if the collector is satisfied that the applicant was a charitable institution or trust which is exempt from tax under Section 88 of the Inland Revenue Ordinance on the date of acquisition of the residential property concerned, then there can be an exemption. There are about 6,000 entities like this in Hong Kong, and under the present system, there is already a mechanism exempting them from paying profits tax. And when people make donations, such donations can also be tax exempted. However, the government replies that, well, if it's a gift to a charity, then that's okay. But if the charity buys it, it's not okay. And it says that the law has not stated clearly as to what is a charitable use. So the government is afraid that this will be abused. I remember when Mr. Lam Wen Kwong was talking on the radio, he said that this bill may catch people who should not be covered. Now you are afraid of abuse. But is it that easy to be a charitable institution? Is it that easy to abuse this bill? I hope the administration can explain to me. Now, Mr. Tommy Chung just mentioned that the Democratic Party has not talked about the CSAs yet, but we're different from the government. We are pleased to discuss with members of other camps. I hope the administration would also be humble enough to listen to other people's views. Wang Guangya asked C.Y. Leung yesterday, have you talked to your team? Well, Ms. Emily Lau, have you finished your remarks on the CSAs? Well, I want them to explain to us, have they talked to members beforehand? And how come everything is such a mess today? And is it that easy to be a charitable institution? Is it that easy to abuse the bill? Madam Chair, all along we have been communicating with members. This is the 19th meeting of this Bills Committee, and for charitable institution, we have talked about it at several meetings. We have told members our justification. Maybe I have to repeat myself. Now, for Section 88 of the Inland Revenue Ordinance, the IRD would exempt the charitable institutions. Some of their revenue would be tax exempted, but the IRD would not monitor the daily operation of the charitable institutions. For example, their fundraising activities, their governance framework, etc. The Law Reform Commission has recently issued a report. It states that maybe a body should set up to monitor charitable institutions. Now, no matter whether it's a charitable institution or whether you're talking about a charitable intention or purpose, actually, these are not covered by a particular ordinance. And up to March last year, there were 7,500 charitable institutions, and over 70% of them were in the form of companies. So for loopholes concerning companies, they would also happen to charitable institutions. And when we look at the spirit of stamp duty exemption, now at this moment, if a Hong Kong person really has a need to buy a property, well, there will be an exemption. But we don't know how many charitable institutions would have such an urgent need to buy properties. We do not know. Actually, we are talking about priority. Now, over 5,000 of these charitable institutions are companies. So if we are to exempt them, are we going to exempt other companies? These are the problems that would entail. And for stamp duty, we do not want it to be less strong. So when people really have a need to buy a property, they will enjoy exemption. But we hope things will run smoothly, and we have listened to members' views. Some exemptions have been added. It's not that we are that rigid. We would not listen to anybody's views. But if there are views which are problematic, then we cannot accept them. And we also want to let members know our perspective and our intention. Well, she said that she has listened to our views, she has incorporated some of our views, and there are now some new exemptions. Now, other than this, you have listened to our views for so many times. What are the other views that you have taken on board? Deputy Secretary? If you look at the government's CSA, well, other than redevelopment, of course, that's the bigger part. There are some other bodies, for example, the Law Society. Let's talk about admissibility. Well, let's talk about members' views. Now, you have said that members have given you a lot of views. What are those views that have been incorporated? And members are moving CSAs, so which of these CSAs will be accepted by you? Well, companies, charitable institutions, and Mrs. Regina Ip's proposal concerning minors. Well, we have just received Mrs. Ip's paper, so we haven't assessed it yet. But for a charitable institution, well, we have told members that there may be a loophole. So as the government, we cannot accept it. Next is Mrs. Regina Ip. Thank you, Madam Chair. My CSA is very simple. It is to delete the exemptions for minors under the age of 18. I think this is a major loophole. It can easily be used by mainland people to evade tax. And this loophole is very big. I understand that Mr. Leung will not be happy with this because he said that minors are allowed to buy property because there are guardians and there are trust arrangements, etc. And now it seems that we are throwing the baby out together with the bathwater. So I think we really need to do it. I have another question. Just now, another member talked about this, and also Mr. Andrew Leung talked about this. He said that now the American government is pulling out from the market, and some experts say that the property market in Hong Kong may fall by 30 minutes. The government says that it cannot accept rigid indicators, and you say that with the negative vetting, the rates can become zero anytime. So if next year is reduced to zero, then how about the duty stamp that I have already paid?
Please clarify your views concerning her CSA, and then please answer the other question. We've only just received the CSA, so please allow us some time to assess the CSA. I want to take this opportunity to say that why we have provided for such an exemption in the CSA. This is because Type 2 children are also Hong Kong PR. So on that ground, they are also given exemption. Since minors cannot sign the documents, so naturally they have to rely on the guardians and the trustees. So that's the original intention. But then we have noted members' views, and we have only just received Mrs. Regina Yip's CSA. We need time to study it. In this bill, there are only two categories of persons that we would allow guardians or trustees to act on their behalf. One being minors, second, persons incapacitated mentally. But of course, they themselves must be Hong Kong PR themselves. So we have to consider the case of mentally incapacitated persons, whether we should regard them or treat them in the same way as the minors. If we are to consider Mrs. Yip's CSA, so we need to take time to look at this. So for the mentally incapacitated persons, how come that you would buy a property for them? I think the loophole is small. If you make a deliberate attempt to buy property on the behalf of a mentally incapacitated person, then obviously it is for the sake of tax evasion. How does it operate? Well, ultimately, a person is given the exemption on the ground of Hong Kong PR status. In terms of operation, it will either be the guardian or the trustee who are doing it on his behalf, and then we have the guardianship of ordinance. And then a person cannot be a guardian without meeting the requirements therein. So we'll be talking about a trustee doing it for him. So we have to look at both categories, and having read Mrs. Yip's CSA, we have to go back to consider it. Do you have any data concerning the number of properties bought on behalf of a mentally incapacitated person, and how many properties have been bought on behalf of minors? Has there been an increasing trend in recent years or in recent months? I'm not sure if the IRD can provide some information. We haven't got the information for this category. So my question hasn't been answered. Ms. Wong, would you like to, if the rate is to be reduced to zero, are you going to refund the duty payers? Now, on the 26th of December 2012, we said that properties transacted after that particular date will be subject to the tax. But then we haven't collected the special stamp, the BSD. It will require a gazetted notice, and then in 30 days' time we can collect it. So it isn't a matter of it having already been paid, and then we need to consider reimbursement. So it is only when the bill is enacted, then will there be a demand note to be sent to the property owner to pay the duty. Well, for Mrs. Yip's CSA, when do you think you can come back to us? Thank you, Madam Chair. Like other CSAs moved by members, we'll come back with a written reply. We'll do it ASAP. It was only yesterday or day before yesterday that we received it. We need to carry out an assessment. All right, 2 members would like to speak, Ms. Anne Zhang and then Kenneth Leung. Who else would like to speak concerning the CSAs? Wanting to ask questions or stating your position? I suggested 5 minutes each. And I just want to ask a question, a brief one. I just want to clarify this point. Now, of course, when I sell a property in my name to another person, then of course stamp duty has to be paid. If this is his first domestic property, then it will be the lower rate. If he has already owned another property, then it will be doubling the stamp duty. What about a company? Even if it is a first property, 15% being the duty rate. In the future, if it is a transaction between companies, does it mean that as long as the property is owned by a company, then you just sell the company? Then, according to the existing taxation regime, even if you change hands for 100 times, you don't have to pay stamp duty? IRD colleagues can supplement. The way I understand Ms. Anne Zhang's question is, it's a matter of selling the properties among companies. It's a matter of change of shares. So you don't have to pay the 15% stamp duty, the buyer's stamp duty. You only pay tax for the change of shares. For the change of shares and the tax, how much is it? 0.25%, 0.2. So if there is a company owning a property worth $10 million, how much is it in cash dollars? You want the duty payable or the consideration? We will look at the value of the shares. We have to look at the assets of the company, and then we'll determine that. Say the property is worth $10 million. If the company has only got this property as the asset, then $10 million will be the basis. Of course, we have to check whether there are liabilities as well. In other words, if I have got a company to hold a property, and every time there is a change of shareholding, in other words, I only have to pay $20,000. And then for the first time that I buy this property worth $10 million, I have to pay stamp duty to the tune of $1.5 million. Thank you. All right, Kenneth Leung, Madam Chair, I would like to follow up on the CSAs. Just now I mentioned people not born in Hong Kong. I didn't get it wrong. I've just discovered a new loophole. There are people who have emigrated to Australia, Canada, and the USA. Their parents are Hong Kong PR. Well, for children born overseas, let me say that their parents are Hong Kong PRs. They have Hong Kong ID cards. They are born overseas. In fact, according to the existing laws, they may come back to Hong Kong and they can get a Hong Kong PR ID card. Even if they don't get an ID card in Hong Kong, they're still entitled to the status. And if they apply for one, the Hong Kong SARG will give one to them. Now, for children born overseas, according to your bill, they will be entitled to the exemption as well. I referred to children born outside of Hong Kong. At the same time, I have in mind type 2 children. But in fact, children not born in Hong Kong are entitled to exemption. Now, even if they don't get the ID card, but then because their parents are Hong Kong PR, even if they haven't been to Hong Kong, they will still be entitled to the stamp duty exemption. So, Madam Chair, I hope the admin will comment on my understanding and tell me whether it is correct or not. Ms. Wong, I did not answer on the spot. For the scenario outlined by Mr. Leung, I think I better check with the Immigration Department. It's a matter of parents being Hong Kong PR, but their child was born in, say, the USA. Whether this child can apply for a permanent residence ID card, I have a question mark in my mind. I did not give an answer on the spot. I need to check with the Immigration Department. Well, when you drafted the bill, you should have carried out research into the matter. For friends that I know, we have this group of people, so I'm not sort of plucking something from thin air. Yes, you may very well go out to clarify this point, but it means that we have to wait for another few weeks. Now, in the definition of Hong Kong PR, if you can remove the second leg, then all the loopholes can be removed. Then it will become a very simple measure. So I'm making this suggestion to you. It's up to you to take it or not. If you want to have safe passage, then you really have to listen to the views of different members. Ms. Wong, I'm afraid I have to go back to check before I can give an answer. Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh, Madam Chair, Mr. Leung may want to look up Article 24(3) of the Basic Law for his question. Are you asking a question? No. I'm trying to give an answer on their behalf. And then Anne asked a very good question. Now, if my CSA imposes a 3-year rule, then in 3 years' time, there may be speculation. But if they only change their shareholding in 3 years' time, they can also just sell it off. Property transaction is not a sin. Even if you engage in speculation again, it is not a sin. I have read all the CSAs. Please read my CSA. It is indeed of very, very good quality. Others are also good, but then my CSA can tie in with the administration's regime, the administration's framework. Now, I'm saying that for this bill, it is supposed to be an exceptional measure. In 3 years' time, since so much land has been sold, there will be a lot of flats. And then when you look at the demand and supply, it means that there will be a lot of flats on offer in the market, and then this bill will be rendered meaningless. And that's why I am talking about 3 years. So please don't say that we are sending out a message that in 3 years' time they can speculate. Well, in fact, it's easy. They can simply change the shareholders. Mr. Chair, are you explaining about the CSA yourself? If you are repeating yourself, yes, I think your CSA is of good quality, but then you may still not be able to convince the administration. Sorry, please continue.
I'm not asking the government to listen to me. You try to convince members. No, I'm not trying to convince the members. I try to convince the members' voters. The bill have to be accountable to the voters. Mr. James Cho made a quality CSA. I support him, and my CSA also has incorporated his view. So I hope Mr. James will support my CSA. I will also support Mr. Tommy Chung's CSA. Well, his proposal is even harsher than mine. For my proposal, I suggest that money be paid into the government's pocket first, and then I will prove to the government that this is not good. But the government says that, well, how do I know whether the shareholders have been changed? But, well, there will be a statutory declaration. This is criminal if you do not do it. We are paying tax now. We make our own declaration. So in Hong Kong, trust is very important. Yes, you have made your points and you are repeating yourself. I hope the government can give us a new idea. How can you make people trust you? I hope this Bills Committee can accept my proposal. And I don't want people to think that by supporting me, they are supporting the property sector. Mr. Tommy Chung? I would also like to talk about the government's letter. Paragraph 6. Well, my English is not good, but why do I want to refer to the English version? IRD would have to monitor this shareholding perpetually. Well, my English is poor. You say perpetually. Can you explain about your answer and this word? And also for paragraph 6, it said as a result of the above-mentioned enforcement difficulties, the Mr. Chung's CSA would result in great risk of BSD avoidance. Well, risk is everywhere. How can you explain to me that this risk is greater than giving the exemption to Hong Kong PR? Well, for my CSA, the shareholders and the directors would have to make a lot of declarations. So how can a company's risk be greater than a person's risk? In paragraph 7, you say that a declaration mechanism would not be effective to avoid abuse. I totally do not understand. As Mr. Shek said just now, there will be a statutory declaration. So if you make a false declaration, it's criminal. Now, would somebody want to avoid a small amount of tax by making a false declaration? And if you buy a property with $10 million, is it worthy to take the risk of committing a criminal offense? And here is paragraph say that without paying a new AVD, etc. So this bill has not been passed yet. You can make amendment. You can say that now it's not written here, then you should not make this amendment. Well, in paragraph 8, no matter whether it's BSD, SSD, it is just a measure put together in a rush. You have not thought thoroughly about it. And it shows that the government has not been careful when it formulated this kind of policy. I have just explained about the word perpetually. Now, if it is not written too clearly, then I would like to explain once more. Well, we'll have to look at it within context. That is, if one day, if the BSD is cancelled, then of course the IRD would not have to investigate anymore. Now, why does the IRD would have to follow up? Because there is an immediate exemption, and the exemption is based on a number of things, for example, undertakings or statutory declarations. So there is a need for the IRD to monitor whether this has been breached. So if the BSD is cancelled, then the ILD would not have to follow up. Now, perpetually means that if the stamp duty is still in risk because the company has already enjoyed the exemption immediately, so the ILD would have to follow up. Now, it is impossible for the ILD to monitor the work of companies every day. So it is very difficult for the ILD to ensure that whether a company has lived up to its promise. And just now, we talked about that when companies buy a property, the risk of BSD avoidance will be higher. Now, although, well, yes, making a false statutory declaration is criminal, but what we want to point out is that there are many ways of buying and selling shares in a company, and this cannot be noticed. So if a person wants to avoid BSD, and if such an act is not easy to be found out, well, he would do it. And that can be done by selling the shares of his company to a non-Hong Kong PR. And the BSD is about a big amount, so there will be an incentive. Of course, I'm not saying that everybody is bad and they would want to do it, but this indeed may happen. And we have to face it squarely. Also, Mr. Chang talked about the sunset clause, whether it has exceeded the scope of this bill. Earlier on, when I answered Mr. Andrew Lang's question concerning sunset clause, I already mentioned it. Now, for the SSD, it would also cover today's SSD, and they will both be affected by the sunset clause. Now, because for this bill, we are proposing a stronger SSD. Is not the SSD that's being enforced now. So if both of them are subject to the restriction of this sunset clause, then it would exceed the scope of this bill. And technically, this is some problems that we have to point out to members. Well, for her first point, that transfer of share cannot be noticed. Now, if a company is to transfer its shares, well, there is a clause stating that the shareholders' shares cannot be transferred under certain circumstances. All these have been stated very rigidly. I don't understand why she said that this will go unnoticed. So I don't understand why she made those remarks. We have made the provisions very rigid. For the number of shares, it cannot be increased anytime. And a lot of things are fixed very rigidly. Well, I don't know if she has not looked at them or what. She said that this would go unnoticed. Well, that would not happen because the relevant provisions are very strict. Do you think a Hong Kong PR's risk is higher, or a Hong Kong PR company's risk is higher? Now, if I use my name to buy a property, then my wrongdoings will be noticed much easier than those done by a company. This will Well, the things you say under paragraph 6 will not happen. Well, Mr. Chang proposed some conditions, and they are actually an undertaking. Now, he can undertake, but we must have ways to monitor whether he has honored his undertaking. So if he has undertaken something and that something cannot be checked easily by the IRD, then no matter how heavy the penalty is, it would not be effective. We are not talking about things on the surface. They may have a lot of agreements behind the scene. And Mr. Chang has also said this, well, if it's so troublesome, then I'll just ask a Hong Kong PR to do it. However, at previous meetings, we also put this forward. Now, if you're talking about a person, you really have to trust person. Now, for example, if I'm not a Hong Kong PR, if I ask a Hong Kong PR to do that, I really have to trust him. But if that Hong Kong PR, the property actually belongs to that Hong Kong PR. So if that Hong Kong PR wants to betray that non-Hong Kong PR, that non-Hong Kong PR would have no protection. But if it's a company, he can have ways to control the company so that the property would not be sold without him knowing. So we only compare these two scenarios. It would be a greater incentive for a non-Hong Kong PR to buy a Hong Kong property through a Hong Kong PR company. So that's why we have such a great concern. Second round, Mr. Leung. Now, after looking at Mr. Abraham Sheik's CSA, I also want the Bills Committee to formally adopt my CSA. Any other questions? Mr. Andrew Yang has made such a request. Mr. Chang and Ms. Chang, do you want to say anything? Just now, Mr. Abraham Sheik said something, and I want to point out that this is a huge loophole. Now it's increased to 15%. But for some companies, if they do have a need to buy a property, then it will become a penalty. Why do they have to pay 15%? Now, if you want to buy it for investment, now you pay 50% one-off, and then you change the shareholders. Then after a few years, you can do it again. After another few years, you can do it once again. So will you consider this? Supposedly, if one company owns one property or two properties, and if the share exceeds a certain percentage, then it would be required to pay a tax. Would it be more simple that you will not be penalizing Hong Kong companies, because Hong Kong companies would have to pay 15% now? Any other members would like to speak? Mr. James Tan? Well, I seldom speak here, Madam Chair. But about Hong Kong PR companies, well, there are many property transactions in Hong Kong now. The Hong Kong government says that if you are Hong Kong PR, you own a property, you have to pay this tax. And if the government, the government thinks that if Hong Kong PR companies are also required to pay the stamp duty, then this problem can be handled. But for a Hong Kong PR company, it can be owned by another company. If that company is a BVI company, is registered overseas, then this overseas BVI company can be sold. Then how are you going to deal with that? Well, this is a huge taxation problem. So a company holds a property, and above this company there is a BVI company. So if they do it this way, it's actually very easy.
whether it is BVI or other places, it costs you only a few $1,000s to set up a company. The administration may think that the residents don't know about it, but soon the citizens will know about them. So how is the government going to deal with it? You can't collect tax from this company. It's a BVI company holding a Hong Kong company, holding a property. And then Mr. Zhang, Mr. Li wholly own the company. Ms. Wang, I will get the RRD to explain the matter. This is exactly because of the complexities concerning companies. So we say that only Hong Kong PR acting on their own may buy a property and get exempted. For companies, whether they are Hong Kong Hong Kong incorporated companies or overseas companies, we treat them the same. IRD. For the scenarios outlined by Mr. Tian, it is a BVI company changing the shares of a company. Well, the BVI company shares, if it is a company not incorporated in Hong Kong, then the change of shares of this company is not subject to stamp duty. For the tax avoidance or tax evadance that Mr. Tian refers to, I'm afraid it is not directly related to the question here. That is whether the Hong Kong PR company should be exempted. Well, if you are changing the shares of a company, of course you have to pay tax. But if there is a Hong Kong BVI holding this company, then for the BVI shares, it is being sold from A to B, and you may not be aware of it. If you start changing this, then the financial center status of Hong Kong will be over. For Hong Kong companies, it costs a few $1,000s, and for a BVI company, it costs a few $1,000 a year. So the Hong Kong company, there won't be any change. The Hong Kong company is still holding the property, but then there will be changes in terms of the BVI company, so the tax can be easily avoided. Could I to answer this question? It is a long-standing issue. No, not for the long term. All accountants can teach me to go about it. But I think they can have. They can prevent tax avoidance. No, avoidance means you should pay it, but you don't. Now we don't need to avoid it. For BVI companies all along, you can have many transactions. No change to Hong Kong company, no change to Hong Kong property. So what can you do? ROD, currently there are already such cases. What do you do about it? How are we going to deal with it? Mr. Tian is talking about something else. That is through the transfer of shares, then you don't pay as much stamp duty when it comes to property transaction. I don't think it is something that can be dealt with in this bill. Now, if we have a company which only starts engaging in property transaction today, then the company has to pay BSD unless it has already bought a property, and then a BVI company would like to buy the property, so there is merely the transaction of shares, and then they can avoid the BSD. I don't think the administration understood my question. I think we should spend more time on it. Yes, for the first transaction, you have to. In future, even if there are transactions, you still have to pay for it. Now, Madam Chair, well, today I should not buy a property. I should get a company to buy a property. And this company is being held by BVI company. Many accountancy firms can do it for you. And I wholly own the BVI. And the BVI company wholly owns a Hong Kong company. And that Hong Kong company wholly owns a $5 million property. So I sell the BVI company to you. it hasn't got anything else. This can be done on a large scale in Hong Kong in future. Now, perhaps you can collect the stamp duty on the first occasion, but not so afterwards. So I don't think you can handle it. You say that it is not related to the bill, but I want to say that you can do nothing about it. It is a broader issue, so can you answer this question? IRD, BVI companies buying properties and the tax avoidance. The BVI will buy a company. The company owns a property. Madam Chair, I think you know it well. But Mr. Tian, you know that it is not something new as a result of the introduction of the BSD. That's all I can say. Of course, we will say that with the introduction of the BSD, well, the government is trying its best to close the loopholes because no exemptions given to companies. Now, Mr. Tian is saying that even if they pay the tax for the first transaction, for future transactions, the tax can still be avoided. It will be covered, not being covered as a result of transactions. Usually people will get a Hong Kong company to buy properties and then you pay a few $1,000s a year to get a BVI company to buy the Hong Kong company. Of course, it has to be cleared of all sorts of liabilities. So I think many professionals who are smart, and I emphasize that this is entirely lawful. It is entirely lawful. So how is the IRD going to deal with it? I think IRD can supplement. As Chair, you have said, Mr. Tian's point goes beyond what can be handled by this bill concerning BSD. It is something more general. In fact, as a result of this, our bill tries to plug the loopholes that we think would be possible. Well, for the majority of the people of Hong Kong, when they buy a flat for themselves, they do so in their personal capacity. But of course, there are investors who may resort to a more complicated company structure to buy the property via a company. Well, through this stamp duty amendment bill, I don't think we can sort of deal with the company structures. What we are doing is that we know that there are different means of transfer of shares of a company. We try to restrict it as much as possible. The exemption shouldn't be extended to companies. Well, I don't think it is not a question caused by the BSD or this stamp duty amendment bill, so please have it raised at a panel meeting. Now, in the past, the people of Hong Kong bought properties on their own. Now that with this bill, you know that you have to pay much more for a $5 million property. In the past, we didn't have that many cases because there wasn't the BSD. Now, if you don't exempt the Hong Kong companies from the BSD, then it will be rendered useless. Anybody can tell that you can hold a property by a company and then you have a BVI company to hold that company. You mean the BVI holding the Hong Kong company? Of course. The RD said that there wasn't this problem in the past. I'm telling you that if you don't exempt the Hong Kong PL company, it will be very easy to avoid the tax, and then you cannot achieve your purpose. I don't think the administration can answer the question. Now, for a single property, you have one Hong Kong company. On top, there is a PVI company. On top of it, you have a number of owners. The commercial sector has already resorted to these means, and it is legitimate and lawful. Yes, I agree with you. I think we better pause here. Yes, members. we are here on the CSAs of members. Just now, some members have suggested that the committee should take over the CSAs. But then Mr. Tony Chair would like to speak, and for the first time, so I better give the floor to him. Madam Chair, as James' point goes beyond the bill, we shouldn't tackle it here. However, we've got experts from the IRD and we've got experts on stamp duty, so it is worth a while to visit this topic, and it is a long-standing issue. About the exemption to be granted to companies as proposed by Mr. Abraham Sheck. It is said that there might be many loopholes and people can buy and sell behind the scene. I can't agree with the Deputy Secretary. I think many more properties are being bought by residents acting on their own behalf. Only about 10+% are bought by companies, and they aren't just for speculation. In many cases, it's for investment. If we raise the tax rate, investors will be turned away. For the point made by Mr. Sheck, I think he has got a point. First of all, he's sort of narrowing the scope. The directors of the company must be Hong Kong PR. The shareholders must be Hong Kong PRs. And the status quo should be maintained for a period of time. I think the duration is open to discussion. Now we are having a demand-side management measure. We want to reduce the impact as much as possible. Now, for the identity of shareholders of a company, if it is to be confined to Hong Kong PR and there shouldn't be any transactions for a period of time, well, I don't think there are many people who are buying a property on others' behalf. So I can't subscribe to the reason. Yes, you can reflect your position in your vote. Mr. Abraham Sheck, I think the government got it wrong in a few places. When the administration answered Mr. Tian's question, well, in my CSA, in fact, all the problems can be addressed. So you can see that they haven't read my CSA. Mr. Tian asked some very real questions. For my CSA, 2A, 1, 2, 3, and 4, all of them are there. So it shows that the administration hasn't read my document. If they have, they would have been able to answer Mr. Tian's question. Madam Chair, the administration has said that they can't accept granting exemption to companies. Mr. Sheck, you have already made the point many times. You are not able to convince the administration. I think the administration got it wrong. I have the duty to rectify it. Please do it ASAP. It is said that the administration cannot tolerate the companies. Well, for the URA, even for flat, we have got companies. Don't stop me. I haven't stopped you. They gave a wrong message. They shouldn't apply double standards. It is totally unacceptable.
Madam Chair, can I reply? Well, that's about replacement property. But we have other considerations. That's why we allow the property holder to be a company. Well, this is to facilitate redevelopment. And it is very clear because we want to achieve a policy intent. It is not that sometimes we allow it, sometimes not. Oh, Deputy Secretary, if it were not you, I would not be so gentle here. Ms. Chen Yuanhan, do I need to declare my interest? In accordance to the Secretariat's guideline, you have to. Mr. James Tan, okay, you just repeat what you have declared before, right? Ms. Chen Yuanhan, I do the same. Yes, Madam Chair, now you are trying to make a judgment. That is whether that CSA be moved by Mr. Abraham Sheck or the BC. Please be quick because I have another meeting next door. It's about railway. Yeah, I'm trying my best. Thank you for your request. Now, if we are to vote, please do that because I have another meeting next door. Okay, now let us address the members' request. Mr. Abraham Sheck, we have to do it now. Just now, Mr. Abraham Sheck, Mr. Andrew Leung, Mr. Leung Kai-cheng, and Mr. Tommy Chang have made a request. That is, the personal CSAs would be changed into CSAs that are to be moved by the Bills Committee. Okay, let us vote on these. Does any other member would like to speak? Let us do this in one go. Because this involves CSAs, I would have to ask other members to come back to vote. Let us ring the bell. Can it be shortened? No. 5 minutes.
我石禮謙我反對嘅。
通常講即係佢好多話我啲修訂啦，因為地產商咧係地產界代表，佢哋唔支持。如果變咗 CSA，
佢嗰個民居有關嗰個。
如果冇人要求我唔堅持，我只係想響鐘啫，係啦，因為我認為係重要嘅，係啊，因為咁耐先投一次票。嗱，頭先剛剛。
Well, for members who were attending other meetings, now we are going to cast our votes because several members have asked me to do this. That is, well, they asked members of the BC to consider this, whether their CSAs would become the BC's CSAs instead of their individual CSAs.
支持委員會接納，呢個由委員會提出啫嘛。嗱，呢個並不涉及嗰個。
Now, this has nothing to do with the contents of the CSA. Do we support that Mr. Abraham Sheck's CSA be moved by the BC, so it does not mean that you support the content of his CSA. I think during the debate, you would have ample time to debate in great details. Okay, 5 minutes up. And I would like to remind members again. Now, some members have made this request. Now, first of all, we have to vote on Mr. Abraham Sheik's suggestion. He hopes that his CSAs be moved by the BC. I'm sorry, the speaker is off mic. Well, some members have moved these CSAs. Now, we all support. Well, we have talked about this already. That is, since we are supporting to move this CSAs, then maybe it should be moved by the BC. So does it mean that we are also supporting the CSA's contents? Well, there is a problem with the Democratic Party because we have not discussed all these CSAs first. Now, just now, Mr. Zhang asked whether we would support his CSA, but we have to discuss with our party members first. So I don't want to send the community this message. Well, with the majority of members support the CSA, so then the CSA will be moved by the BC. Well, members have not asked this question, and Ms. Emily Lau, this is your concern. Well, this has been the past practice. It's not my concern. Mr. James Tan, on this point, I do not agree with Ms. Lau. Now, if I vote yes on this move now, it doesn't mean that I will support the contents of the CSA in the future. Well, I think my understanding is the same as that of Mr. James Tan, and Ms. Emily Lau said that it's not. So I hope to hear members' views on this. Now, why is it like that? Well, because some members have made such a request. Why do you want to do this? Well, because Mr. Sheikh said that if this is done, well, other people would not think that this is something put forward by the property sector. It is put forward by the Bills Committee. So we respect the rights of members. So shall we vote now? Mr. Zhang, please be brief. Now, if Ms. Lau says that her party has not talked about the CSA yet, and they have not looked at them thoroughly, so can we defer the discussion of these so that members can go back and take a careful look at the CSAs and discuss with the relevant parties? I do not know what other members think. So can we defer the voting? Because this is not our last meeting anyway. So if we do so, then members can go back to talk to the parties. Now I have to exercise my discretion. I need to lengthen this meeting. Does anyone object to this? Because I would have to allow members to speak. Well, I was at the meeting next door. Now, if you lengthen this meeting by 15 minutes, I really cannot sit here because I have to go back to the other meeting. Okay, 30 seconds. Mr. Shek? I support Mr. Cheng's view. Does anyone object to that? I hope that we can do the voting today. As I said just now, according to my understanding, we are just asking these CSAs to be moved by the BC, and it has nothing to do with what you will speak in the future council meeting or whether you will support the CSA or not. Okay, does anyone object to voting now? Then let us vote. First, Mr. Abraham Sheikh asked that I have read this already, to move the CSA that he was trying to move. For those who say yes, please raise their hands. Mr. Cheng asked for a division. Secretary, please put down the names. Please stay put so that the secretary can put down your names. Mr. Paul Che, Abraham Sheikh, Andrew Leung, Kenneth Leung, Charles Mock. After I read your names, you can lower your hand. Tommy Chang, James Tan, Yusi Wing. Okay. All of them? How many votes? The secretary will read out the names. Paul Chair, Abraham Sheikh, Charles Mock, Andrew Leung, Tommy Chung, James Tan, Yusi Wing. These are in support of the proposal. And Kenneth Leung. 8. Those who are against, please raise their hands. Anne Chung, Wang Kwok-hing, Zhang Ge-piu, Chen Yun-han, Leung Chi-cheng. 5 votes. Chen Yun-han. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them. Anne Chung, Wang Kwok-hing, Zhang Ge-piu, Leung Chi-cheng, Chen Yun-han. 5. How about abstention? So the result of the voting is that the BC will move this CSA, and then Mr. Andrew Leung asked that the BC move the CSAs that he was trying to move. For those who say yes, please raise their hands. If there's no request for a division, I'll just count. You asked for a division? Paul Chem, Abraham Sheikh, Andrew Leung, Kenneth Leung, Charles Mock. Tommy Chung, James Tan, Yusi Wing.
Please count again. Shall I him? Andrew Leung, Kenneth Leung, Charles Mock, Tommy Chung, James Tan, Yusi Wing. How many votes are there? 8. Same. Those who are against? Mr. Wang Kwok-hing, Tan Ka Piu, Chen Yunhan, Leung Chi-cheng, Zhang Laiwen. The same, 5. Abstentions. For the time being, 2. Emily Lau and Mr. Pan Xiaoping. So again, the BC will move this CSA. And then the third one is from Mr. Kenneth Leung. Those who support Mr. Kenneth Leung's request to ask the BC to move his CSA, hands up please. 7. You claim a division, all right. Paul Chair, Abraham Shack, Andrew Leung, Kenneth Leung, Charles Mock, Tommy Cheung, James Tan. Mr. Yu Si-wing, did you raise your hand? So 7. Those who are against, Anne Chang, Wong Kwok-hing, Leung Chi-cheng, 4 of them. Abstention, is it the same? 4. Emily Lau, Poon Xiu-ping, Yu Si-wing, and Chen Yunhan. Abstentions. So again, it has been carried. The last one. Tommy Cheung, do you make the same request? All right, let's vote on it. Those who are in favor of the motion to ask the BC to move the CSA on behalf of Mr. Tommy Cheung, hands up please. Mr. Wong Kwok-hing claims a division. 7. Is it the same? No change. I read it out. Paul Chair, Abraham Shack, Andrew Leung, Kenneth Leung, Charles Mock, Tommy Cheung, and James Tan. Thank you. Those who are against? 4. Anne Zhang, Wong Kwok-hing, Chen Yunhan, and Leung Chi-cheng. Abstentions. 3. Emily Lau, Poon Xiu-ping, Yu Si-wing. Again carried. If there aren't other requests, then we have covered the CSAs. I hope the administration will come back as quickly as possible concerning your reply to Regina Yip's amendment. So Tommy Cheung and Abraham Shack's amendments will be moved by the BC, but then the 2 covers something similar. No, 4, all 4. But for both members, they are sort of covering something similar about Hong Kong PR companies. Yes, I'm aware of that. For Abraham Shack and Tommy Cheung, they are having something similar, so it will not be they will contradict each other if we try to have both. So maybe we should look at it this way. We got the proposal from Abraham Shack first before Tommy Cheung. I don't know whether this is a point of consideration. We can have it. Well, maybe Mr. Tommy Cheung's amendment can be moved first. I think that's even more draconian, because you have to look at the logic. Because for his, he doesn't ask for the payment in advance, and I will support him. For mine, is about refund. And I'm going to withdraw. No, I will be the mover. All right, Mr. Shack has clearly indicated that he would like to give way to Tommy Cheung. So please check the rules, and then we can give a report to members next time. I think on this note, we have to end the meeting today. At the next meeting, we will continue to look at the admin's reply to members' CSAs, and we'll finish with the cross-by-cross scrutiny. I very much hope that when we have our next meeting, which is going to be the 6th of January 2013, we can cover those areas. Thank you.